This is the video explanation for your diagrams for week 11 dealing with verbals. Keep in mind that there are three types of verbals that we're looking at. We have participles, which are verb forms functioning as adjectives, that is, they're modifying nouns. We have infinitives, which are the to plus the verb, and then we have gerunds, which is the ing form of the verb. So you want to look for those three things as you're scanning the sentence. Once you've identified them, where they are, then you need to look at how they're functioning so you know how to diagram them. As with all of our sentences, we're going to start with the main clause, the independent clause first, and then work with the other elements after that. So in this first one, Emily Dickinson is our subject, became is our verb, that's a linking verb, and we end with an adjective reclusive, which makes it a pattern 4. Increasingly is an adverb modifying the adjective, so it goes below there. We've got our main sentence done. So now we go up to this little introductory phrase, and we see an ing form. So growing up in Amherst, Massachusetts is telling us about Emily Dickinson functioning as a participle. So it goes on the structure below the noun that it's modifying. To show that it is a participle, we put the verbal on the diagonal, and then in Amherst, Massachusetts is telling us where, so that prepositional phrase goes below. Emily Dickinson is the implied subject for the verb. Now we're treating it as a verb again to identify the sentence pattern. Grow up is an action verb, but there's no direct object. So subject plus intransitive verb makes a pattern 6. She needed solitude, subject, transitive verb, direct object is pattern 7. We put her perhaps underneath the verb that it's modifying. And then we come to reflect. Keep in mind that when you see twos, they can either introduce, be part of an infinitive or be a preposition. So when you see that, you need to make sure if it's a verbal that it's followed directly by that verb, which it is in this case. So she needed what? To reflect. Verbals are, the infinitive is diagrammed the same way as a preposition. So you have your to on the slant. Instead of a noun, you have the verb on the horizontal. And then she's reflecting what? On the small events of her life. So those two prepositional phrases are diagrammed below. So we have pattern 7 for our main sentence, and then we need to address the verbal. She, again, is the implied subject that's working with the verb reflect, which is an action verb with no direct object. So subject plus intransitive verb is pattern 6. She began, subject, action verb. And as soon as you have an action verb, your next question should be what? She began what? Writing poetry. Ing form functioning as the direct object, so it's a gerund. Remember, noun structures are always put up on a pedestal in the slot where they function in the main sentence. So we put our pedestal in the direct object spot. Gerunds are diagrammed diagonally on the step structure. So we have writing on that diagonal. Now we kind of switch gears and treat it as a verb again. Writing what? Writing poetry is the direct object. So we would diagram that the same way we would normally do, with the verb on one side of the main line, the horizontal wall, and then the direct object on the other side. Where is she writing poetry? On scraps of small paper. So that is going to be diagrammed below the verb, both of those prepositional phrases. And now we can identify sentence pattern, subject, transitive verb. This whole thing is direct object, is a pattern 7. And then we look at our verbal. Writing is an action verb, working with our subject, she. So we have subject, action verb, direct object, makes the verbal a pattern 7. She was becoming famous is our main clause here. Subject, linking verb, and adjective makes a pattern 4. Locally is modifying famous, so we put that below famous. Famous why? For her strange behavior. So the prepositional phrase here is clarifying famous. It is diagrammed below the adjective. And then during the 1860s is answering a question of when. So that's an adverb question. It's diagrammed below. The one thing you need to be careful of here is don't assume that an ing form of a verb is going to be a verbal. It's not necessarily a participle or a gerund. In this case, it's actually the verb. So we just have the one clause that we need to identify, which is the pattern 4. Skipping to the main part of the sentence, she wanted, subject, action verb. She wanted what? She wanted to wear. So we have an infinitive form functioning as the direct object. Noun structure, so we put the pedestal in the direct object slot. And again, we diagram it like we do a preposition with the to here, the verb here, and to wear what? Dresses is our direct object. Then we start just putting modifiers in. The dresses were white, so that is the adjective going below. Only is modifying white. It's an adverb, so we put it on that hook structure. And then for some reason is answering why, so that goes below the verb. So now we can identify sentence patterns. We have subject, transitive verb, direct object is our structure here, which is a pattern 7. And our verbal, she is our implied subject. Where is the verb, and a transitive verb, where what dresses, so that is also a pattern 7. This next one is a great example of how you want to break things up. The diagram looks insanely complicated. The sentence reading it, there's a lot of elements, but if you take it a step at a time, it really makes it quite manageable. So again, we start with the main sentence, subject verb, she began. Also is the adverb, so we put that below the verb. She began what? She began lowering. A form of a verb functioning as a noun makes it a gerund. Noun structures go always up on pedestals, and remember gerunds go on diagonal on the step structure. So we put lowering on the step structure. Now we shift gears. We've diagrammed it as a gerund, and we're going to now treat it as a verb to figure out how the rest of this sentence is going to be diagrammed. Lowering is an action verb, so she's lowering what? She's lowering treats. So that's going to go on that main line following the vertical line showing that it's a direct object. And now we get to our prepositional phrases. How was she lowering them? In a basket. So that prepositional phrase is answering the question how. It's a verb question, an adverb question. So it goes below the verb. And she was lowering them to children. So that's diagrammed also below the verb. And then we get to this ing thing going on here. And that is, waiting is obviously a verb. And it's modifying children. It's describing the children. So if it's functioning as an adjective modifying a noun, it's a participle. So participles are diagrammed on the structure below on the diagonal to show that it is a participle. And then below her upper window is telling us where the children were waiting. So that is diagrammed below waiting. So we've got our diagrams done. Now we just need to go back and identify sentence patterns. So she, subject, transitive verb, direct object, this whole complex thing makes it a pattern 7, our main sentence. Then we have our gerund, lowering treats. Again, our implied subject is she. Lowering is an action verb with a direct object, so that makes it a pattern 7. And then don't forget our little participle here, which waiting is an action verb working with a subject children. Children waiting, no direct object, so subject intransitive verb is pattern 6. She is the subject of the main clause here. Refused is the verb, and that's an action verb. She refused what? To leave home. So the infinitive, again, functioning as a noun structure, goes on the pedestal in that direct object slot. Leave what? Leave home. There's no preposition here, so we just attach it and put the noun on the horizontal below. And then we back up, and by the age of 40 are the two prepositional phrases that are answering the question when. When is an adverb question, so these prepositional phrases are diagrammed below the verb. So our main sentence, we have subject, transitive verb, direct object, pattern 7. And our verbal, we have our subject implied she. Leave is an action verb with no direct object. So that's a pattern 6. This one's fairly simple compared to what we have been doing. She is our subject. Had is the verb. And remember, that is an action verb. Sometimes we think that, it's an auxiliary verb and we want to put it in a different category, but have is an action verb. And have what? Reason. So we have subject, action verb, direct object makes pattern 7. No is our modifier describing reason. And then we have our infinitive, which is to travel. That's modifying reason, telling us what reason we're talking about more specifically. So again, the to goes on the slant, travel goes on the horizontal, and beyond Amherst is telling us where. So that's modifying the verb travel. So we've already identified our main sentence pattern. We just need to do with travel, is working with the verb or the subject she. Travel is an action verb, but there's no direct object, so that makes it a pattern 6. Her job was to care. This shows that if you can kind of isolate those prepositional phrases, it makes it much easier. Job is subject, was is our be verb, and it's followed by an infinitive. Was what? Was to care. So this is functioning as the subjective complement. Noun. So the noun structure goes up on that pedestal. We diagram it the same way we would a prepositional phrases. Care for whom? For her parents. The prepositional phrase goes underneath care. And then for much of her life is telling us when. It's a question of time. And when questions are adverb questions. So those two prepositional phrases are diagrammed below the verb. So we have subject, be verb, noun makes the main clause of pattern 3. And then our verbal is subject plus our verb care, which is an action verb with no direct object, is a pattern 6. Okay, another one of these insanely complicated ones that we're just going to break down and do a step at a time. She elected, subject verb. Elected sounds more natural to say decided. She decided what? To remain is our direct object. So the infinitive is functioning as a direct object. Noun structure, pedestal goes in that direct object slot. To remain, we do as a preposition, and then we switch and again treat remain as a verb. Remain is a linking verb, remember. And so remain what? In touch with the outside world. So we've got a prepositional phrase functioning as an adjective. So that prepositional phrase functioning as an adjective, remember, at the end goes up on a pedestal because it's not literal. She's not actually touching the outside world with her fingertips. So in touch, it goes up on the pedestal with the outside world is describing how she is in touch or what she's in touch with. So that modifies in touch. Then we have by keeping up a voluminous correspondence. By is a preposition, and that's telling us how she is remaining. How is an adverb question. So that by goes underneath on the slant. And then by what? By something. Something is a noun. So keeping up is a gerund. So it goes on the pedestal because it's a noun structure on the pedestal on that horizontal line. Keeping up goes on the diagonal on the step. And now we're going to shift and treat it as a verb. Keeping up what? A correspondence. And then we have our two modifiers there. So now let's go back and do sentence patterns. She, subject, transitive verb, direct object makes the main sentence a pattern 7. To remain, remain is a linking verb followed by an adjective, pattern 4. And then we go to our gerund. Keeping up is an action verb with a direct object makes it a pattern 7. So hopefully you can see that just taking things one at a time really simplifies things and makes it much more manageable. Again, just to recap, when you're working with verbals, scan the sentence, look for ing forms of verbs, look for to followed by a verb, and look for participles, either the ing for the present participle or the ed, or irregulars for the past participle. Diagram the main part of the sentence, then turn your attention to the verbal, decide how it's functioning, which is going to determine where and how it fits into the diagram, and then go back and look for sentence patterns for the main part of the sentence and for any verbal you have, because they all need to have a sentence pattern identified with them. Hopefully that helps and you kind of have got an idea. Verbals are admittedly difficult, but I know that if you just work through it and practice that you can get this.